Reptichip sets the standard for reptile substrates. Made from the highest quality coconut available anywhere in the world, Reptichip allows enthusiasts and keepers to provide their reptiles with the necessary humidity and thermoregulation required for your animals to thrive. You can support the podcast by heading to reptichip.com/snakeboy or visit the link in the description below. This episode is brought to you in part by Exoterra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use Exoterra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, Exoterra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. Exoterra, make your reptiles feel at home. This episode is brought to you in part by Unlimited Exotic Pets. Every day is Veranda Day for Nick Lillis, and it shows. At Unlimited Exotic Pets, Nick produces high-quality monitor lizards with a deep commitment to ethical care practices and top-tier nutrition. These aren't just pets. They're responsibly bred, ethically raised animals. Whether you're looking for a new companion, starting a breeding project, or anything in between, Nick has you covered. Unlimited Exotic Pets, keeping and breeding quality without limitations. Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 87 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Ari. It's Flagle, right?
Yep, Flagle.
All right. I've heard you talk on enough podcasts. I should know definitively.
To know which is the right way to pronounce it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really looking forward to talking to you because of, Reptilandia, your herping adventures. You've got so much incredible stuff in your life.
Thank you.
How did you get to this point? How did you end up being like so obsessed with reptiles? I mean, your whole life is reptiles, right?
Yeah. It's I would say obviously, like, it started as a kid. Growing up, I'm asthmatic, so I have asthma. And then as a kid growing up, I had a lot of activity-induced asthma, so I couldn't really have those common furry pets, that you would have. I mean, I had a hamster and all that stuff, but I had to have some special dog that was dander free and all this stuff. And then I was always fascinated with dinosaurs and everything. And just from being, I just remember little bits and pieces of memories as a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old of just trying to catch bugs and catching lizards and snakes. I just loved it. So my parents got me an iguana, I think was my first pet. And then I caught a snake after that I kept in my school desk as a kid. So that was fun. And it just kind of fed the craze or the addiction from there. And it was just I'm also an artist. So I'd be going to school for art, and then I'd come home and I'd be taking care of reptiles. And then it was just vice versa. I went to school for a degree in computer and traditional animation. And when I graduated, it was like, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to be jumping into the industry. It was like during the time of like Finding Nemo came out. So
Mm.
I'm like predating myself now. And so it was like there was no way I could get into the industry at that time. So I was like, you know what, I'm just, I've been so fascinated with the reptiles my entire life. I'm going to pursue that. And that just kind of wound me up in the right direction with things and, talking to people, meeting a lot of really shitty people, and then meeting a lot of really beneficial people in the industry. And it kind of created who I am now. And then it just kind of like went from there. And I went to one of the main AZA institutions. And then, I was approached with different projects and things. But I think like with the Bolin stuff, I had always been fascinated with, like I said, with reptiles, particularly snakes and lizards were my thing. Snakes were like my big thing. So, I remember just kind of, coming across an image, and that was what did it for me.
Mm.
With Bolin's pythons. And it was the image that was in the book Living Snakes of the World, John Merton's book. And it was like from 1987, I think it was. And it was like this huge book, and it had like all these snakes in it. And I was just like, oh, this is awesome. I've got all these animals in it. I can look at all this stuff. Every kid's, fantasy, they have all these animals in the book and everything, carrying it around with me. And I remember seeing the snake in there, and I was just like, wow, what's that? And it was like, 2 or 3 sentences about it. And then it was just like, after that, it was just like I was trying to, find anything and everything that was related about these snakes. And it all pretty much shadowed the same 3 sentences or paragraph or something like that. And it was just like, okay, I'm working with this, and then it was just like nonstop. Yeah, that kind of started it right there.
So you said that you were looking for a way to get into reptiles as a career. What did that look like? How did you steer your life in
Well,
that
it
direction?
started off, I was kind of like a parasite at the local reptile shop that was around the corner. I was always there. When I was out of school, I'd ride my bike there. I grew up in Arizona, so I was a desert rat by blood. And, if I wasn't in the desert looking for things, I was, going to this pet store and, pestering the owner and, saying, hey, can I work here? And she's like, oh, you're only 12. You can't work here. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to hang out for another few years here. And, that was kind of like my first real taste of it. Like I was, kind of unofficially working there for a while. And then that changed, and I got older, and then I started kind of jumping around different pet stores when I was, living alone, like when I graduated and, before I went into college. So it was like, I moved out like when I was I think it was like 18, something like that. And I was just jumping around different pet stores and working with reptiles and working with organizations and working with rescues and things like that until it landed itself in like a professional setting, I guess you could say, where I was at an AZA institution, which is the American Zoological Associations, if people don't know the acronym. And I worked there at an institution there for almost 13 years, I think it was.
Wow.
And during that time, I was kind of molding who I was becoming in the reptile world, I guess you could say. I started, it was just Bolin's pythons, like nonstop. Like I was just wake up. I mean, I'm still like that. I wake up, Bolin's python, go to bed, Bolin's python kind of stuff. But, and it just kind of built up more and more there. And then it kind of presented itself with more opportunities. Like, I was speaking to people that had, worked with them, institutions that had them, or, people that had a photo of one or something like that. And I just kind of sent out like a giant web of just, like a quest for information, and then when I went there for the first time, that just kind of solidified everything for me. And, it's been almost 16 years now that I've been traveling there. So
Tell me about your first experience going there.
it was really interesting. I had gone out. The scenario was weird. I was hanging around a gentleman at the time who turned out to be a real scumbag, which is kind of like the start of a lot of reptile industry stuff, And
Yeah.
I had been doing some like entertainment kind of like TV stuff with him. and there was an approach to do a TV series for kids, and I was like, oh, I want to do it. Let's do this, And he's like, and I put together like a whole like kind of show script of like the episodes, like what I want to do. I was like, I was enamored with Mark O'Shea at the time too, because it was when I was doing all this stuff, it was Steve Irwin and Mark O'Shea that was coming out, but I never really was on Steve Irwin's kind of in his corner. I was more Mark O'Shea, like biology, science in the field, kind of museum things that kind of appealed to me more than just the main streamlined media, shock kind of video in a way and stuff like that. I mean, obviously Steve was doing conservation work, but I was looking more of it on a scientific level, like, describing things and research papers and stuff. So I was following all of Mark O'Shea's stuff, and I kind of based a lot of where I wanted to go after things I saw that he was doing. Like, I wanted to do the tree crocodile or the green-blooded skink from New Guinea or things like that. And, my first episode that we were talking of doing was like, I got to go find a Bones python. So I actually was able to go try to find a Bones python for the first episode. And I remember putting everything together and organizing all this stuff and getting there and just realizing, like, I was like, man, I'm really... this is really over my head for what I'm doing. I think I was 21 when I got there.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I just like showed off the plane and like multiple planes. And it was just like a very, I'm seeing all these people walking around naked and stuff. And like, I'm like, wow, I'm in a whole, and it was just like so freaking cool. I was like, this is just awesome. But the amount of work to get where I needed to go and then being able to see the environment is so different as opposed to reading about it in a book or talking to somebody or just seeing the animal. I mean, it's there's so much involved. It's not just an animal. So but I remember going there and meeting this tribe, and I stayed with this tribe in the mountain. Like I said, I was like 21. And I'm like, barely making it up this cliff. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so out of shape. I don't know what I'm doing. And I get up onto this area, and it's like, I set up camp and everything. And there's, all these Dani, which is the main tribal group that's out there in the highlands in the Baleen Valley where I was at. And I'm staying up there with them and just talking to them and trying to, I had a couple guys from like New Zealand that were with me that were, doing film and everything. And yeah, it was pretty incredible. And then on the first trip, we didn't even find one where we were at. So it took me and then I had like a hiatus for a couple years of traveling. I mean, obviously I was still doing, my passion. I wasn't, it wasn't more than just, reading about them and talking to people about them and stuff like that. And I initially started working on the first book after that point. And then I went out there. I started becoming friends with a supplier that was out there that was in the industry, who's a local, and we became really good friends and still are. We've known each other for almost 30 years now. We're still close friends. And I flew out there to meet him. And then he's like, hey, I'll set you up with somebody that, can take you where to go. And it'll be trustworthy and all this stuff, but you still got to be careful because it's really dangerous. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So I went out there by myself and met somebody, and I didn't speak any of the language or anything like that. And just kind of, it was awesome. It was just, it just happened. And after that, I linked up with a local family that was there who I still deal with. And it was, multiple trips of going out before I was actually able to find an animal. And now that I look at it in a lot of ways, I feel like it was, I was being tested really as far as like what my intentions really were and who I was and what I was about, and also like what I can offer to the community, because everything it's never free, obviously. It's not a monetary thing typically, but it's you've got to provide for, you give and they give. That's how it works, even with a family group. So I went back again, and I remember they were like, all right, follow us. And, they took me on a 7-hour hike, which was absolutely horrible. And it was just like the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And then I came up on this nest, and there was a fucking bolus pythons sitting on eggs.
Wow.
And they're just kind of looking at me smiling. And I'm just like, oh my God, and it was like, here we go. And then it was just downhill from there, just nonstop, just like bam, 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 bam. So
did you think you were being tested by the indigenous people that you
yeah.
were? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they obviously didn't want, they didn't know, like I said, they didn't know what my intentions were really. They just knew that there was a foreigner that wanted to come and see a snake and all this stuff. And, and it's, the area it's an interesting area. So like the West Papuan area is the West Papuan side of Indonesia is Indonesian owned still, it's not, locally owned, which that has been a constant battle for years with, Free Papua and everything like that, where it's like, this is our land, we want it's very similar to the North American scenario with, Native American Indians and, it's like, this is our land and stuff like that. So it's like you go to an area where the Indonesian government influence just stops and it's tribal land essentially. And, you might have worked something out with the Indonesian military or, somebody there. But it doesn't hold up once you're on, tribal land. It's a whole other world. So I had to really gain a lot of trust, and like let these people really kind of observe me and see what I was capable of. They also didn't want to take somebody up in the mountains who was just going to die, even though I thought I was after that hike. It was absolutely ridiculous, and. But it was incredible, and I'll never forget it. And then that just continued. And then it was like after that, every time I would return, it was like, guaranteed an animal, like bam, bam, bam. Like we were finding animals in areas like nonstop. I was starting to able to like really start to observe behaviors and be able to photograph things and, really get kind of an idea of the environment and, and then kind of relate it to the animal, because it's so much, the environment is even cooler than the snake itself, in my opinion. The snake is just, the icing on the cake, in my opinion. So,
yeah. How much has the landscape or the people there or both, how much has it changed over the years, the 16 years since you first went there? Has it gotten better or worse? Is it being deforested?
Yeah, I would say it has gotten much worse. Where obviously you have, people, we do what we do, where we take over things and we grow, populate. So obviously there was a lot more. The population grew. Infrastructure changed a lot. Like I remember the first like 4 or 5 times I was there, like my airport was a chain link fence wrapped around an old broken metal detector with school like classroom chairs sitting on the runway. And like they funneled me through the fence, but everybody else is kind of just walking around it, going wherever they want. I'm like, well, what, they saw the Westerner and they're like, oh, quick, plug in the machine, kind of thing. So that's what my initial exposure was. And then as I, became coming back and forth, more routinely, because I was working at the zoo facility. So my travel time was really limited. I was, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, if I was able to generate enough time off and things like that. And I remember just seeing things change, like their airport got a little bigger, they opened up a spot over here. But, the biggest thing that I noticed was just like the landscape changing, where they were building more roads, more access, big machinery was coming in. I remember seeing some areas that I remember hiking that were just kind of bulldozed through. So like the mountain was kind of just like cut in half in a way. It was really creepy. So I saw a lot of that. And then I saw a lot of the traditional attire, what the natives would normally be wearing would be just like, headdresses, chest adornments, penis cords. Men would be naked essentially. Women would be, showing her breasts and they'd have like a skirt on. But now it's like, it's very rare to see that. You can still find it, but it's not as common as it was, 15, 20 years ago, if that, that was a normal thing, but yeah, so, I've seen a lot of changes in there. And, The good thing is, the people are very adaptable to what they do and what they've been doing for thousands of years. So I think they'll be fine. But the fauna and flora will definitely, as always, be take the brunt of everything.
What about the Boelens pythons themselves?
As far as the changing of,
Yeah,
finding and stuff like that.
I mean, has there been any conservation efforts over that span of time that has helped them, or?
There hasn't been anything really implemented now. Like when you're saying like conservation side, like the western side of Indonesia, they're a CITES 2 animal, so obviously they're needed to be permitted to leave there. But on the PNG side, they're a highly protected. They have the protective status of bird of paradise and things like that. So it's a very different scenario over there. But I do remember, or I do see animals like nesting areas being pushed back further. I still do see some areas that I've visited many times that are still fertile areas, but as with everything, the animals are just adapting, so they're kind of receding back further into the mountains, if that makes sense, and the forest. It's just how things go. I mean, I remember areas where I'd have to hike a couple hours to get into a spot, and now there's a dirt road that's right there now. So which is great for me because I can take a 4-wheel drive vehicle and I can take the dirt road, and then I'm in the jungle in 20 minutes from my spot, and another hour and I'm at a nest site. But it changes. That's just how things are.
Yeah, progress.
Yeah.
How have your trips and experiences over there changed the way that you keep reptiles or professionally in the zoo environment?
Personally, it's really reduced the amount of animals I keep on a personal level. And it's not just because, for any kind of particular reason aside from, just time and obviously like that. And it's really focused, like really honed me down into working with what I love, which are these snakes. So it's like, I just, for the most part, just keep them as opposed to all sorts of other things I used to keep. But on like a husbandry level, like I'm always like when I'm there, I want to see a snake because I want to, observe it and see what it's doing. If it's an animal I've seen before, or if there's something interesting about it, or what it's, up to, or, parameters of its nest or anything like that, typical. But I'm always examining like the environment itself, and trying to replicate what I ultimately can do for the captives that I have and then the animals I have on display. Because like I want that habitat to be as accurate as possible in my care. So I'm looking at, temperatures, humidity, the types of rock that are there, the types of vegetation, what's the soil like? I mean, I was taking soil samples, like, how is the water? Is the water hard? Is it soft? Is it cold? Is it warm? Things like that. So I'm just paying attention to every little area and aspect that I can relate to, providing these animals an even better captive life, when they're with me or whoever I share the information with. I always like to share stuff. So it's like, I'm always trying to put stuff out. It's like, hey, I saw this, or hey, they don't need to do this, or hey, so I'm trying to better off what we have. And, because it's ultimately it's up to us how we're taking care of our animals, and there should be no reason why we can't provide 110% for our captives. It's just our responsibility as good keepers,
I know there's so much stuff that I could keep, and I keep, I'm not going to lie. Like I have this pull on me to like get a big rack and just like get a whole bunch more stuff, and it's really hard to fight that urge because there's the collector part of me that just wants to get more stuff, and especially I want to get more animals, and especially when you find like small things like Antaresia and things like that. But at the end of the day, the thing that I enjoy most about keeping snakes is observing their behavior and seeing them do things and try to elicit different behavior out of them by giving all these different stimulus, like, heat lamps and, UV, and they don't turn on at the same time. It's kind of a staggered timer and
Yeah, I know
things like
exactly how
that.
you feel. There's so many incredible reptile species that we have access to work with, but it's like a fine line. You ask yourself, it's like, morally, is that correct? Do we have numbers, or do we have quality in what we're doing? And that's one of the things I get asked by people. They're like, oh, and I always finish it before they um, finish the question. They're like, if you could only keep one, and I'm like, Bolin's pythons. Like, it's like, sorry, some people are like, oh, if you could only keep one reptile, I'm like, Bolin's pythons. But I mean, I do have a couple.
What's your second? What's your second? Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Oh man,
I actually have that written down.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's so many really crocodile monitors. I love Varanus salvadori. That's an incredible lizard. I don't know. I've got so many cool things. If I could keep, I would keep trachyboas. I love trachyboas. Whenever I go to Ecuador, it's like my go-to. I have to go see them. There's all sorts of interesting animals that I would love to keep, but it's like at the same time, I'm like, can I do it? Like, can I offer it? And then also too, like, because like I have Bolin's pythons, so my room is kind of tuned into Indonesia, in Papua. So it's like, okay, if I bring something in, is it going to work in my environment that I'm creating for my Bolin's? That's the other thing. So it's one of those. It's like a catch-22. So Bolin's pythons. That's how I answer it.
How do you keep Bolin's pythons, and how do they, like, what? Just like, what are their parameters like? What's your room like? How's it set up?
Well, so for a long time, they were really considered an incredibly difficult snake to keep, and they're very easy, actually. The issue prior with that statement was just because of the animals in the early 70s and late 70s, early 80s. These animals there were quotas to bring in adult wild caught animals. So you'd be getting these animals that are 7-8 feet that are already mature, and they're just filled with parasites. They're stressed out from transport, importation, being collected, being shipped. So by the time you get an animal, it's not in the greatest condition. So 98 to 99% of those adult animals that came in all usually died within the first year. But now that we have access to these, farm babies, they say, we're able to raise up these young animals, and they're acclimating to our captive settings, and they turn into fantastic captives. And I mean, obviously, there are certain things that you can and can't do with them, obviously with animals, but for the most part, they're very easy. I maintain like neonates or juveniles. I do them in simple, 10-gallon tanks up to a 30-gallon tank. With, a hide spot, mulch substrate, water dish, some kind of decor vegetation in there. I keep them relatively cool. That my ambient in my room is, mid to low 70s. My humidity is around 70 to 80% constant. I spray down my cages in the morning. I spray them down before the lights go off at night. And then I provide a small basking spot for them also in the daytime, as well as full spectrum UV. I'm a big proponent to offering UV. It's not going to hurt anything. If anything, it's going to benefit. And you see a lot of really interesting behaviors when you offer that, as well as seasonal behaviors too, when you provide that for adult animals. So as they grow, then I obviously increase the size of the enclosure. Adults can be maintained in 6 foot to 8 foot long enclosures easily. I do heavy vegetation. I'm a big bio guy, so I like to have bio substrate and plants and things like that. I try to maintain that in there because it also helps with good oxygen exchange, good stimulus for the animals, and it looks nice too. And then as the animals grow larger, if they're not going in a 6 or 8 foot long cage, we provided a beautiful enclosure here at the zoo where I've got I think it's 15 feet. Yeah, it's 15 feet long by 7 feet wide and 7 feet tall.
Wow.
And I built like a big stream in there, and it's got a bunch of rock faces on there and lots of kind of topography, elevation and decreasing and stuff like that, and some big trees and stuff, lots of vegetation and things like that. But I mean, you don't necessarily have to do that, but why not? If
Yeah.
why not provide? So, and yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much how I keep them. Like I said, they're relatively easy to keep. The issue I see with captives is excessive feeding obese animals. They're a large snake, but they're not a fat snake. That's the thing. They're very muscular, and in captivity they have a very strong feeding response where it's a learned behavior essentially. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's hungry because it's up at the front. Well, the only reason it's hungry is because it thinks it's getting fed all the time. So I feed babies once a week to twice a week to push them past that fragile stage. And then I start slowing down on the feeding frequency. And my adult animals eat probably twice a month, I'd say, a decent sized meal twice a month. If it's a seasonal thing, I'll increase the food a little bit more, but for the most part, I'm not feeding really heavy. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, I feed my animals once a week, a large rat or something like that. I mean, if the animals are in a 4 foot long cage, you're going to promote a fat animal by doing that. And we don't want, fat, lazy potatoes. We want lean, mean, active breeding machines. That's what we want. We want to have that. It's not healthy. It's like, it's like us. We're going to sit around in the house all day and eat hamburgers and pizza. We're going to get all slobby, but if we're outside doing things and being active, we don't have to eat all the time, but so it's, but like I said, they're pretty easy to take care of. Just, basic stuff, nothing really crazy.
I can't fathom feeding an adult snake once a week. Like it's got to be.
I mean, people like watching animals eat. It's entertaining. And that behavior a lot of time, I believe, is a misconception for a learned behavior that we're basically teaching them. They're very smart. They cue in on a lot. They're very observant, very intelligent snake. They're obviously they're closely related to scrub pythons, so they have that similar kind of behavior, but even they're a little more different, than scrubs. They just have more of a presence to them, I think. Yes.
What is your hotspot temp at?
For the young animals, when they're in the glass terraria or enclosures, as they're growing, I usually will give a basking spot around mid to upper 80s. The one thing with Boelen's pythons, they're able to generate heat really quick too. Obviously, when they're younger, they don't have that really iridescent color and that jet black, which helps absorb heat really fast. But as they get older, they're able to generate that heat fast too, and even maintain it throughout the night. And I did I've done some really weird studies where it's for a whole winter cycle, I left the windows open. I let the room get down to 40 degrees, and I monitored the snakes every night and took temperatures, and they were always 10 degrees warmer than the outside temperature was in their box. So they're able to generate and warm themselves up. They're specialized animal for the environment they're in. So
Is that necessary to for reproduction, cooling them? I'm assuming that you food and temperature cycle them.
Yeah, so I have not been successful in reproduction yet. I've gotten really close, but as far as and that's a really interesting topic too. Everybody wants to know how to breed them, and we're making really good steps forward. There's been some really positive um, progression with captive reproduction for the species in the last 10 years, and there are some reproductions. There's been some successes, and we're kind of putting together almost a recipe, but it doesn't always work. That's the interesting thing. It's sometimes it works. There's no fertility, or the eggs are too large, or it's just not it's not fine tuned yet. That's the best way. So it's still being, tuned up to what it works with. But for the most part, the animals do have to be exposed to cooler temperatures. They're found in highlands where it's already cool. I mean, your daytime temperatures, ambience, low 70s. The sun comes in, it gets about 80, 90 degrees in certain spots, and then it disappears, and clouds come in, and it's just wet. Nighttime temps. I took temperatures of 49 degrees one time. Um,
Wow.
Nesting spots, the animals are sitting at around 72, 68 degrees sometimes. I mean, it's an interesting environment. They're a really fascinating snake. And to say that, it's a dietary trigger or a temperature trigger, I just don't feel like we're at that point to say that's what it is. We're
Mm.
still trying to figure it out, right? But like I said, we're having some successes. There's been some successes, which is great. But hopefully we'll get there. Yeah, I kind of wonder if it's going to be one of those animals that's like, okay, well, I paired my snakes this year. I should get eggs. We'll see what it goes, as opposed to saying I've got eggs coming, or you know what I mean, like guaranteeing it.
Yeah.
So they're just really interesting, and I think that is I know that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with them. And I know a lot of people are interested in them because they're interesting. Unfortunately, a lot of people want to work with them because they think they're going to get rich breeding Bolin's python, and it's not reality. So,
Hmm.
just not how it works. So,
Yeah, so that was kind of one of my follow-up questions is that why you think you're so drawn to them, because the code hasn't been really cracked yet by
well,
the masses? I know that there's a couple people that are successfully reproducing them, but it seems like that's what you always hear, is they're kind of this mystical snake,
yeah,
that's
I think my attraction to the species has nothing to do with reproduction. I think my attraction to the species and my interest is what they're about, and where they live. Because by all accounts, you've got an animal that's 8 to 10 feet. 9 feet is about average. You'll obviously get larger animals with anything, but the environment's just really cold. It's really wet. You wouldn't anticipate to find a large constrictor or a medium-sized constrictor to live in something like this. Typically, you would be expecting something small that's able to get down into these little cracks down deep in the ground where it can stay warm, as opposed to a large animal that's a foot or two below the surface of the jungle floor. And then just the way they look is awesome, and they just have a huge cultural influence throughout New Guinea, which is also really intriguing to me. I just think that's super cool, and it's more than just a snake. It's something that everybody there knows. And historic, or not historically, but culturally, everybody knows.
Can you give me some examples of that influence in their
Yeah.
culture?
So one of my areas I really enjoy is ethnographics. I collect a lot. Obviously some of the masks I have in my background. I collect a lot of Papuan in the New Guinea art, and stories are one of the biggest things that I really enjoy. So whenever I'm there, I'm always, if somebody new is there, I always ask them, I was like, hey, you know what the snake is? And they're like, oh yeah, I know what it is. And be like, all right, well, tell me why you know about it, or anything like that. And I usually get some really interesting stories, but I've heard some really crazy ones about it has, you go through the highlands, and there's always a story of, you can always ask somebody, you know what the snake is, and they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And but there was a story, a creation story that I thought was really neat, where basically there was a female snake that had two eggs, and out of those eggs was a man and a woman, and the man and the woman, basically helped create, this area in New Guinea. Like they were the like Adam and Eve kind of story in a way.
Wow.
I've also heard of a really interesting story where there was a huge battle between all these animals in the jungle in the highlands, and it was and one of the animals that was in this battle was this Bolin's python, and it started losing the battle. So what it did was it fled away into the jungle. But when it did so, it took all of the feathers of the bird of paradise. It took the color of the couscous. It took, this and that of all these different animals with it. And it left the island with all this adornment from all these other animals and things. I've also heard of it as a dowry, so it would be presented in a marriage to somebody. There was another one where it was a bringer of culture. They said that before there was man, the snake extended its body across the ocean or land bridge, essentially, and it allowed people to walk across its body to populate these certain areas, and that's why we have a diverse population of ethnic groups in the highlands. So I get really interesting stories like that, which I love. So and then you get some that are like it's a bringer of evil, or I've only had a couple negative ones, or it's a totem or a god-like figure. I've heard that one a lot. But yeah, it's just fascinating that there's so many stories revolved around this single animal. It just kind of feeds my infatuation with them.
Yeah, that's the creation story is really interesting because essentially in that story, God is the serpent.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's this serpent that is basically bringing man to what we are now, which is it's really fascinating to me that but it's just like, it's not just like it's a snake, it's this snake. They know, and there's multiple names for it, like different names. I probably have a dozen names written down, if not more. And it's not just on the West Papuan and the Indonesian side; it's on the PNG side too. I was over in PNG earlier this year too, which was the first time I went to PNG. I went to the Goodenough Islands as part of a species expert with the Port Moresby Nature Park, and we were looking for Bolin's pythons on Goodenough Island to see if the historical report from the early 90s was accurate. And we did not find it on the island. However, it's not to say that it's not there, but the people there were stories of a snake that matched the description, and it was similar, like, mythology kind of things with what they were saying, like the spirituality with it. So,
wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I mean, were any of the names that they have Bolins?
The names they all meant Bolins, but they weren't Bolins. Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. It was, I'm trying to think, there's, Papa Gran Moran is a PNG name, and it basically means father python. There is, Hitam Wallow, which is the black snake or black python. What else is another one? Mulini is another one too. That's kind of like not a proper English term for it, but it's kind of like a Highlands name, I guess you would say. Dadulama, which is from the Goodenough Islands. That's what they call the Bolin's python, which is like a deity figure. I'm trying to think, there's another one I can remember right now. It's been a long day, so I can't remember all of it.
Yeah, it's that's fine, and we'll talk about you just recently started the Bolen's roundtable. Well,
Yeah.
not just recently, literally today,
Yeah,
right? You did
it
that?
came out today. It's been something I've been thinking about doing for a while. I've got a lot of friends that are doing podcasts, and I think they're great. Because it really creates a platform for a lot of young herpers, and as well as like seasoned herpetoculturists and whatnot, and keepers and stuff to hear interesting stories and hear about interesting people and what people are working with. And it's one of my friends, MJ, I was talking to him about it, and I said, hey man, I was like, I'm thinking about doing this. And he's like, oh, please, please, please. He's like, I've got an open spot. Do you want to do it? You want to do it? You can have your own show. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So I've been coming up with a lot of like really interesting guests that I have. A lot of these people have never been on a podcast or even been on the internet. They're like old people, but they're like, it's going to be really cool because like I want it to serve as I want it to serve as kind of a digital database for information for these snakes as well, because a lot of these old people that I'm going to bring on are probably not going to be around forever, and their stories I don't want to get lost.
Yeah.
So that was one of the important things I wanted to do. And then I just kind of want to have a platform to kind of just set records straight on what we need to do and what we can do and how to do this right and how to work as a community on things like that to encourage, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, your life is so incredible. You do all this and stuff. It's like, but anybody can do that, and I want to encourage that with the younger generation to get out and do it. Don't be afraid, to jump on a plane. Obviously, check to make sure it's safe. But I don't want to be wild for saying that. But I want to encourage people to get out. And try. Just try. Go find something. Go look for something. It's exciting. Whether it's in your backyard, whether it's across the ocean or what. But that's kind of like what I want it to be, and I want it to be a safe place, and then also a place for me to share my like field observations and like any kind of new things that I'm working on that are Boland stuff. It's just a whole Boland's Python podcast, and it's just going to be discussing topics and reviewing ideas and brainstorming and just me rambling about why I like Boland's Python so much, and
how often are you going to be doing it?
It's going to be twice a month. So
Okay.
2 shows a month. And we did the pilot show that came out today where I kind of just basically broke down like, what is a Boland's Python? Because a lot of people don't know, it's like,
Yeah.
and it's funny because like I was saying on there, I was like, a lot of people that even, there's people that have them, they don't even know where they're from. I was like, give me a break, man. Come on. Like
Yeah.
it should be your responsibility to know things like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we're working with animals, we should know everything that we possibly can know about them to our ability. Obviously knowing
Yeah.
everything is not possible, but that's the exciting part for the discovery, but yeah, so we're going to do, I've got to pre-record an episode on Monday, I think, because I'm getting ready to head out of the country again. So I've got a very good friend of mine, Frederick Essinger from Sweden, who's bred them, I think, God, I can't even remember, 5 or 6 times. And he's just a very, very interesting person as far as like his ability to work with these snakes. And, I've got a lot of really interesting questions I want to ask him that I've never asked before. So he'll be the first guest. So he's like super nervous, which I keep telling him to chill out. I'm like, come on, man.
Oh man.
Talked many times before. He's like, but yeah, so it's going to be fun. I hope people enjoy it. I think they will. And I've got, I was talking to a friend of mine who's in PNG, who works for the nature park there. And he's a tribal member of a group called Chimbu, which are the skeleton people. You guys can look that up. It's really cool. And they have Boland's Python folklore in their tradition. So he works with them at the nature park, and he's going to come on and talk about it with his family and his all his history, and then working with them at the park and stuff like that. So it should be cool. So I want to do fun things like that for it.
Oh man, that's incredible. Yeah, you have so much passion about these pythons, and and just nerdiness. I mean, you were
Yeah,
just
yeah, oh yeah,
nerding
big time.
out. Yeah, because I listened to it this morning, and I mean, just I did learn quite a bit, and just like the the fragility of their skin when they're babies
Yeah,
was something that I was like, what? I had no idea. I
yeah,
had no idea about that.
their skin is really, really thin. It's real fragile. My wife made me laugh the other day because she said they look like little pieces of raw chicken because it's like kind of transparent almost. And I'm like, no, they do. And I mean, it's interesting. The babies don't leave the nest until they shed, so they stay with the
Mm.
mother, and which is super cool. My family that I visit out there, part of my research, because I fund all my field work personally and then through donors and grants, and I have a incredible supporter, Todd Goodman from Timberline Reptiles, is has supported me for a number of years, and he helps me out a lot with these trips and everything because it's expensive to get there. I mean, it's a long ways to go, and part of my research funds go to supporting this family because they help me in the field with doing my work. So part of that is they continuously monitor areas for me. If anything is changing, if a new female is having eggs, if there's a male, any interesting observations, and he sent me the other day a video when he got back of a clutch of babies that had hatched, and the babies were sitting outside of the nest, basking with the mother right in the nest, like right outside the
Wow.
nest. You're the first person I shared that with too, so there you go.
Wow. That's
So, which
awesome.
would be a really really interesting example of maternal behavior with this species, which is not a big thing, not a known thing really with a lot of pythons, aside from when the eggs hatch. You know, they don't really stick around long, but we know with rock pythons that they do it, and now potentially with Bolin's pythons that they as well do it.
Wow. Yeah, something I want to talk to you about is the blood pythons at
Yeah,
Reptilandia. That there's a lot I want to talk about there because
cool.
you have blood pythons that are in an enclosure. So like walk me, because I want to keep my blood pythons in
Cool.
enclosures. I want to be able to see them. So I kind of want to talk to you about how they were set up. And then I want to get into the whole maternal incubation side of it and
Yeah,
how insane that must have been.
yeah. So it was really cool. So yeah, Reptilandia is an incredible place. Fortunate enough to help curate it and build these incredible enclosures for the facility. And we have a pair of blood pythons that were given to me by a good friend named Kyle James, who works with blood pythons. And he's like, "Yeah, man, put them on exhibit." I was like, "All right, cool." And I was really surprised because they displayed really well. And
Hmm.
it's kind of like a dimly lit enclosure. It's not like dark, but it's dimly lit. It's not super bright. A lot of heavy, soil and mixed vegetation on the bottom with leaf litter. It's got a single light in there that I think it generates a temperature to, like, I don't know, upper 80s, maybe 90s at certain parts of the day. 70% humidity. And they're out. You can see them just sitting there kind of coiled, and then they'll go underneath stuff and everything. But we put them in there. He gave them to us as babies, and we kind of just stuck them out there and raised them. And I don't know, they're probably 3 years old now, I'd say. And they're, maybe 2 feet, if not, like, they're not big by any means. So I walked in there one day, they were breeding, and I'm like, oh, well, that's cool, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, we weren't really trying to breed them. Not that we don't like blood pythons, it just wasn't part of the collection goal. They were more of a display. And I didn't think anything of it because I thought they were too young. And I came back in there, a couple months later, and she's sitting on a big pile of eggs. And I was like, oh my, and I
Wow.
didn't even realize with her. I mean, she didn't stop feeding or anything like that, just kept doing her routine, didn't look huge. Um, she did get all coiled up prior and started doing some twitching and stuff like that. And then the next morning she had a big old clutch of eggs.
Wow.
She had 4 eggs, which I don't, that's the first time that we've had blood pythons. So I don't know if that's a small clutch or whatever, but, yeah, and we just like, let's just let her incubate them and see what happens. And so, the male stayed in the enclosure with her. I didn't separate. I didn't offer food during the entire time. She sat there and just twitched, and we posted up a bunch of videos of her, thermoregulating and doing all this stuff. And, I'd spray down the enclosure around her every few days just to make sure the humidity was good, and then make sure she was, getting a little bit of hydration. And she stayed on the eggs, and then all of a sudden, bam, they started pipping, and it was super cool.
Wow.
So they stayed there with her for a little bit, and then they just kind of slithered off, and we just, pulled them, put them in the bag. But yeah, and then she, we offered food. It was interesting because she laid them and incubated them, and then they hatched. And while they hatched, she was entering a shed cycle. So she was blue while they were hatching, while she was coiled on. And once we pulled the eggs and everything, I offered her a frozen thawed chick, and she ate it right away. So,
Wow.
but it was really cool. So, I mean, you can do it. It's not impossible. It's
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of get kind of turned off on it or just overwhelmed because they think it has to be like this really intense scenario. Your temperatures have to be exactly right. You need to have this exactly right. You need to do that. These are animals that adapt to a lot of things. That's why they're still around, because they, it's not exactly 88 degrees in the wild 24/7. There's fluctuation in temperatures. There's fluctuation in humidity. You might have a seasonal rain that comes through and just washes everything out this year, and then it's dry the next year. Things change. So as long as I looked at it like, as long as we were maintaining relatively, consistent temperatures that were not like, a 30-degree or a 20-degree change, she was going to do what she knows what to do,
So she laid the eggs not in a nest box, just out in the
No,
open.
yeah, she did an impression in the soil in the soil mix that I did, and pushed back a bunch of leaf litter and kind of made a nice perfect coil for herself. And then she started twitching about 24 hours before she deposited the eggs. And then in the morning, we walked in and she was coiled up on the eggs.
Dude, that's so effing cool.
It was
I
it was
can't
really
even.
neat. And then the cool part was like, some of the people would notice it and they'd be like, "Oh my God, there's eggs." And I'm like, "Yeah, we left them on there." And they're like, "What?" So they'd go back down and they'd see them. And, some people didn't really notice because they weren't really looking. But the reptile people that came through, or just the regular people that saw it, were just like blown away, because it's like, it's really cool. I mean, the general public is lacking so much reptile knowledge just because it's just not what they're into. So, but
Yeah.
if we're able to provide it and be able to showcase it, why not? And it was awesome. All of them hatched, all four. So,
And what's the dimensions of their enclosure?
so their enclosure is about, let me see here. I would say it's about 3 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, it's not huge by any means. And I mean, because they're not big snakes yet. We were, obviously we'll move them up to bigger cages, but they just weren't really big. And it has some, fake rock work in there. Some logs, things like that, big water dish, lots of leaf litter. I really enjoy putting like good leaf litter and having bioactive stuff. All of our enclosures are bioactive. So we've got all sorts of like little millipedes and roly-polies and bugs crawling around in there and everything that help out, And she just kind of made an indention in there like she would do in the wild, and just coiled up on it and just sat there.
Wow.
It was
And
really cool.
So the pair is in. You said it was a 3 by 2 by 2.
Yeah, roughly around that size. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so insanely cool and I mean, they're only, she's only 3 years old and
Yeah.
reproduced and
Must
maternally incubated.
just like turning 3. I mean, they're not big. I mean, they've got to be maybe 2 feet, I'd say, and probably about a big around is, I don't know, a plum, I'd say.
Uh-huh.
So they're not big, they're not huge, but he bred with her. She had 4 fertile eggs, and they all hatched. They went a little longer. I've got it written down. I think they went about 10 or 12 days longer than what the literature says. But I was like, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm like thinking, well, man, are these going to pip? And then when I said that, I walked back by and one of them was like, popping out. So it was cool.
How's their temperament? Are they pretty chill?
Yeah, they bite. It's like, whatever, it's a blood python, they bite, but they're beautiful, they're cool, and I like them. And I do have a blood python in my collection. I have a magpie. My friend Kyle gave me a magpie, and I love that snake because it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
But as far as blood pythons, it just never was really my kind of shtick. But I certainly think they're absolutely beautiful, and there's a lot of interesting stuff being done with them, and they inhabit a really cool area too. It's like, so, but yeah, it was really neat. So we do artificially incubate a lot of our things that we have, but when we have the opportunity, or if it's something that, we're like, hey, let's give this a shot,
we'll
try it. That's how we learn, and
that's so cool.
Yeah. So
and do they like get under their leaf litter, or like they kind of get down in it with just their head poking out?
What they'll do is so the male does this a lot. So they're always moving around in different spots around the enclosure, but the male he'll bury himself down in, and he'll just kind of barely poke his nose up right up by a leaf. So you have to scan the cage first. Otherwise he'll come flying out like a rocket, so it's like, it's just what they do. It's their behavior. So, yeah, it was super cool. They're neat. I just look forward to, more stuff like that we can show.
Yeah.
I got eggs from our Mangshang vipers earlier this year also.
Wow.
And we went maternal with those as well, because I built these underground nesting chambers for them and the Bolins, with the mindset of saying, hey, I want them to go underneath here and lay their eggs and blah blah blah. But the eggs weren't fertile, so obviously they didn't hatch. So, but she incubated them and did everything she was supposed to do, and it was cool too, because like even through the first, I'd say 3 or 4 weeks, she was doing everything where she was watching, or she was around the eggs, watching them. The male would come in and out and check on her and do his thing. And then she even got to a point where she kicked out like an obviously bad egg that went bad first. She bumped it out of her coils, and we reached in there and pulled it out. So it was cool.
Wow. What, just real quick on the blood pythons, do you see them climb a lot, or do they not utilize the rock ledges or
they
anything?
will. So the rock ledge, so I said it, so the cage is about 2 feet, maybe a little less. And I've got like some rock decor that I built into the back. So it's kind of like a ledge. It's rocky, and then it goes back and it resets back itself. And they'll climb up there all the time. They'll go up there and sit up there and kind of tuck themselves up in a tight ball or something, or push themselves. But yeah, they will climb if they're given it. I mean, obviously they're not going to climb. Well, I don't know if they would or not if I gave them the opportunity. I wouldn't see them really going up super high, just because they're such a heavy-bodied snake. It just might be really uncomfortable for them, but they certainly go up on that ledge and sit up there and do stuff.
And what is their nighttime temperature get down to?
Throughout the season, so like right now, our building is at around 74, 75 at night. And then the enclosure itself is probably 78, I would say. And it's still holding on to humidity throughout the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how are their sheds in that enclosure?
Yeah.
Perfect sheds?
Yeah. I've never had any issues.
Wow.
Yeah. Every once in a while, we'll have a snake or something like that does like a goofy shed or whatever. But, I've seen it in nature with stuff also. It's like, but I mean, if it's like a repetitive kind of issue, then there's a husbandry related thing, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, with the Bolin's pythons and kind of their, it sucks that they're so expensive, but I guess that's just kind of the nature of the beast when they're not so readily available.
I have a lot of views on that. That should be for like another show. But it is what it is now. And that's just how it is. I mean, you can't go back. You can only
can you give me some views? Just like,
so I feel like I mean, social media is a wonderful tool we have now that we're all like utilizing like 100% of the time of day, regardless if you're realizing it or not.
Sure.
And I feel like with the social media craze, it kind of creates these genre moments, and
Mm.
somebody sees something really unique and they capitalize off of it. And I've seen several, individuals do that before it was to the point of now. And that kind of was like, well, if so and so is selling them for this, I'm going to sell them for that too. And then on top of that, it's funny because people are like, oh, it's the United States, isn't it? Well, everybody in the world has social media now. Some of my guys that I visit in the Highlands that I'm sleeping in a hut with have Facebook. It's like,
Wow.
so they see the craze of certain things, Bolins, for example, they'll see that, somebody is selling them for $14,000 and they're like, oh my God, I know where that is. I see those all the time. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to grab every fucking one of these things and I'm going to try to sell them. So it really has it can have a very negative impact on these animals in the wild with that. Obviously, I'm not one to tell you what to sell things for because that's not my business. That's yours. I can just give you my opinion. Do I think they're worth it? Oh yeah, they're worth $1 million in my mind because it's what I love. It's my passion. I see how special and unique they are. The other thing, one of the things that upsets me is, I feel like with the industry, we put a huge price tag on these animals, or not just Bolins, but just anything. It really limits the amount of people that are able to work with that. You might have, for instance, a $14,000 price tag on a snake, for Bolins, pythons, and they're still very difficult to reproduce. Well, all the people that can afford a $14,000 snake have them, and they're not able to breed them. Well, what about that one kid living in his parents' basement that doesn't have $14,000 to spend on an animal, but might have the chance or the idea and figure out how to breed them?
Yeah.
It's just not, it's just not fair in a lot of ways. In my opinion, that's my personal opinion. I feel like we kind of shut out some of the individuals that could really, do some things with this stuff. I meet a lot of really young herpers that are just fucking awesome,
Yeah.
and they're breeding things that are like, nope, that I never thought anybody would be breeding, but yet they can't touch an animal that's over a certain amount because they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's just not fair for some of these people. And it's not in a lot of, I mean, I'll probably get some hate for it. I don't care. But it's just like, it's just not fair for the animal, I think too. And then
No, I
like
agree.
said, the double-edged sword of it is like, you've got people that are out in these animals' homes and they see these snakes and they're like, oh, I'm going to make $1 million. Well, you can't just go catch a snake, a Bolin's python, and ship it to the United States. It's not how it works. There's
Yeah.
rules, there's regulations, there's permits, there's quotas. There's certain people that can do it, certain people can't. So then you've got people that are out there collecting as many of these animals as they want, hoping they're going to get $1 million. And, a good portion of those animals are just going to sit there in their hut and die.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, is it morally right to do that in a lot of ways? But that's not my place to say. I have my own opinions, about stuff. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. I'm really attracted to melanistic animals that kind of live in these areas that get really cold. I think that that's
yeah.
super cool. I don't know why that's so cool, but like diamond pythons, I think are really awesome. And I have a trio of those.
Cool.
And Argentine boas, again, very melanistic.
Yep.
They come from an area that gets pretty cold. I have a trio of them. There's something very attractive about that. And I don't know if it's just that the hardiness that they kind of carry with them, that that like they can just withstand something more than other animals.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I feel you with that. It's interesting. There's something about it that's just more than just your regular everyday kind of thing. And I don't want to like downgrade everything else. I mean, obviously, there's some incredible animals out there. They're all special. They're all unique in their own ways and the way they survive. But, anytime when you start getting to a place where it's like really difficult to inhabit for other animals and there's animals that are flourishing there, that's really interesting to me because it's like, well, why does it, what makes them better than the others? Why are they able to do this? And what, adaptations do they have that we don't know yet or do know that allows them to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100% it. I mean, diamond pythons, out there on a rainy day, that's, 40, 50 degrees or, the Argentine boas are even more, cryptic in my mind, because there's so much less information. I can't have people on my podcast that live with them in their backyard, like the diamond pythons.
Yeah.
And so like when you said the thing about, go out there and, see the animals and all that, man, that's something I would love to do with Argentine boas. Cool. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
And see, that's cool. Like, it's like, okay, like you're at a point with, with your animals where you're enjoying working with them. They're flourishing in your care, but yet you want to know just that next step of like, am I doing it right? Or what else is there? Like, that's what gets me. Like, what else is there? Like, and it could be something as simple as like, oh, they favor hanging around certain vegetation as opposed to something else, or they don't like the type of substrate that we have that we give them in captivity, but there's something different about where they live, for an example. So, but yeah, it's just cool. Like, I try to encourage people to go out and do that stuff. Obviously, like I said, be careful. Read where you're going first. Don't just decide to jump on a plane and freaking go to New Guinea. It's not worth it. please. Well,
I've heard that seeing Argentine boas in the wild would bring some significant risks. That's what a couple people have told me.
Yeah, and that's a reality. I get asked a lot. Probably at least 5 or 6 times a year, I get asked by people to take them out to go see Boland's pythons. And I would love, I mean, there's certain things of it. Like, I would love to be able to share that excitement that I get when I see them every time, like it's the first time. But there's some really, really serious risks with that. Not just with where I go, but with anything and certain stuff, like you said, with the Argentine boas too. And it's like, at the same time, it's like, I don't know if I could live with myself if it's one thing if I'm by myself doing it and something happens, because that's me, that's my passion. I've been doing this, I've been going here. But for somebody else, it's like, that hasn't, and something were to happen, I don't know if I could deal with that, And then the other side of it is, you take somebody with you and they fuck it all up, and you've got to, I go back. That's my home. I don't want to go answer to these people because so and so pissed on their idol, or something, or something like that, or did something stupid. And that's the other thing too. Like, like, having street smarts is one of those things that I feel a lot of people don't have anymore. It's like you don't do that. The way you carry yourself, the way you present yourself, what you do, how you speak, it's all being observed, whether you're noticing it or not. Everybody's watching, everybody's listening. And there are people that are very good at watching and listening, and they can take advantage of people like that. So those are always things to think of.
Have you had any hard lessons to learn regarding?
Oh, yeah. I've had some. I mean, I've never been. I think probably the only time I was scared was when I got really, really sick. All of a sudden, I had been going. Oh, I've been traveling there for years and years and years at this point, and we had got wind. I had gotten wind from another person or another village or whatever, that there was a female that was in an area, and I was like, I want to go see her and see if the environment's different or whatever. And it was very different. And that was my incredible moment where I walked down on this nest and the eggs were pipping in front of me. So I was like photographing and filming it, and just like blown away that I'm watching these eggs hatch. And I got really, really sick like shortly after that. And I don't know. Some people said it was malaria. Some people said it was something else. The locals said it was the mountain. that was making me sick. They said the spirits, they gave me a gift, but at the same time, now they wanted something from me. And you can't argue with people like that when they tell you stuff like that. It's not a smart thing to do. And I got really, really sick. And that was the only time I really got scared. Basically, where I was, we found an abandoned hunter's camp, and it was like this thatch roof hut that was short and like low to the ground. It wasn't like a typical honai, which is what they call it, like a grass hut. And and I crawled in there and I laid in there for, I think, days. It felt like, and it was just cold, hot. I was sick. I was diarrhea, throwing up. It was terrible, and I got really nervous because I was like, I'm really far out. I'm going to die in this hut. They're not going to know where I'm at. They're going to have to drag me out of here. And that was about the scariest I've had. But I mean, I've been held up by people out there.
Real quick, when you were in the hut, were you were totally alone?
No, I had my friend with me, one of my guide friends with me, and he was there watching. He was traveling with me when I was there from the village because I have to have somebody with me there. And so I was there, but it was just me and him, and I was just like, this is, this is terrible. And, I waited, eventually, I crawled out and we got out of there, but it was absolutely horrible. And I just stayed in, I don't even remember all of the story because it was just like it was like a fever dream. It was terrible. And like, I wrote about it in the Serpents in the Cloud book. And I remember like waking up, like brief periods of just like bizarre colors and all. It was like a nightmare. And I remember hearing like these heavy, like smacking noises. And I was like, what is going on? And like, turns out these like local boys were just wandering around in the mountains. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they were killing fruit bats, and they were beating their heads with rocks to kill them.
Oh no!
Because they were going to eat them. And
okay.
They came walking into this little hut in the middle of the night with these fruit bats, like right in my face. And I was like, what? And they were asking if I wanted to eat them. And I was like, that is a bad idea. I mean, fruit bat tastes really good. I've eaten it before, but I was like, that is not the time, and, but yeah, I mean, so that was nuts. And then, like I said, I've been held up by locals when I'm coming out of the mountains, and like, because I have to borrow somebody's truck, and they're drinking out there. You can't have alcohol in certain of these areas, so they make this really weird concoction, and it's like gasoline, and it's just putrid, and they drink it. They can't hold their alcohol. They get really crazy, really dangerous, and they don't think well when they're on it. And they came running up to me. They blocked off the road. They threw a big log down on this dirt road I couldn't pass. And they came up demanding things and just screaming. And they're all around the truck. And they got these big rocks in their hands. And they're just like, doing this and that. And one of them had his, I'm hanging out the window, just like, what do you want? And one of them was like pushing the rock on my head. Like, okay, I get it. It's just like, but they just wanted $5. And I was like, here's $5. And they're like, oh, thank you. Have a nice day. And I drove off. It's like, so I mean, I've had some really sketchy situations, as with anything. And I travel alone aside from my friend that's in the village, that lives in the village, for a number of reasons. I don't like bringing a lot of attention to myself just in general. So, if I'm by myself, I've got my hoodie on, I have my tattoos covered up, I'm wearing a hat, nobody's going to really pay attention to me. They're not going to look twice. I do my stuff. I don't cause any problems. I have a smile and I leave. I just go in and out, and say hi and spend time with my friends that are in the mountains and stuff, and the family that's there, bring them a bunch of food and give them some money for the kids and things like that. And besides that, then I'm, I'm not walking around with neon colors on and crazy, like tech gear and stuff. I mean, I bring a lot of gear with me, but I'm way out in the mountains. Like, I mean, I am way out there. So like nobody's going to really, freak out. I did bring a drone with me. And I flew a drone over this nesting area. And when I jumped out of the truck, and I had my friend from the village and then 2 other guys that just decided to follow us, go with us out there because they wanted to see what we were doing. And I put the drone outside, and they freaked out when I took off with that thing because it was a big drone at the time. I didn't have one of those smaller drones that I have now where I could just stick in my backpack. This is like I was carrying like a case and all this shit. And they like, you would have thought like a dragon came from the sky and landed down there. They were just like, eyes were open and they're like, whoa, you know, it was, so that was cool. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, it's my happy place.
And so are you pretty well known in this area when you go there
I'm
to
well
visit?
known with my group, with my family that I'm there. Like I said, I don't like to try to bring unnecessary attention to myself where I go, just because it's a lot of civil unrest. I'm a foreigner, so I could be used as, you know, ransom or whatever, you know, and so when I go in, I'm like, I know exactly where I go, and you know, I just, you know, when I'm walking around, you know, if somebody comes up to me, I'll speak like enough to them to say, hey, oh, okay, he knows what he's doing, we'll leave him alone, kind of thing,
Mm.
and stuff like that. But I mean, I try to keep a low profile. That's my thing, really. It doesn't do me any good to be all crazy and wild and all that stuff.
Do you organize trips like herping trips, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to do that now. Also, I did a trip earlier this year. God, I was like gone so many places this year. I'm trying to remember if it was this year or last year, but it was earlier this year. I did a small group to Sulawesi,
Mm.
and I took a friend of mine and two of his friends that are birders and herpers also, and I took them out to Sulawesi to look for sailfin lizards and go birding and go herping and stuff like that. And you know, it was really nice, and I enjoyed because I enjoy going. And I was like, you know, I know some cool places to take people, and I've got a really good network of safe people to help. It was like, you know, maybe I'll offer a couple trips a year. So I've got two trips, or actually three trips that I offered. One of them filled up right away. And then I've got two other trips that I'm kind of toying with if I'm going to pull them down or if I'm going to keep them up or something. But I think it'd be fun, you know, take some serious, you know, minded people that are mature and, you know, professional, you know, have, you know, are professional in the field and stuff like that, and just have a good time and show them some really incredible animals and experience some incredible places and amazing food and stuff like that too. So yes, I am.
That's awesome. Yeah, that let me know if you do an Argentine boa one. That would be fun.
So yeah, my stuff is all Indonesia and Papua.
I know. I can
know, but
dream.
I do know I do have an idea in my head of somebody that probably could make that possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right. Yeah, I'd be interested to talk about that. It's you know, and it's so hard. I mean, just between the, you know, the money aspect of it and
yeah,
then trying to sell it to my wife with the kids and everything, it's like it's hard enough just herping locally, you know.
yeah,
It's like time is such a scarce commodity, you
yeah.
know.
No, you know, time is a, you know, blink of in an eye, you know, as of an eye essentially. And it's funny because like I have she's going to be 17, a 17-year-old daughter now, and like I've been going to New Guinea when she was an infant, you know, and
Wow.
I remember my ex-wife at the time would always yell at me, "You're always going to New Guinea." And I'm like, "Sorry, gotta go," you know. Like, all right, gotta go. Love you, you know. But and so my daughter has always been aware of it, and she always knows, like, oh, Daddy's in Papua or Daddy's in Indonesia right now. And then when I met my current wife, she just absolutely loves it, and you know, now I'm starting to take her with me on some of these trips so she can experience it as well. And my daughter's getting old enough now where it's like I don't have to be with her 24/7 to, you know, she can stay at the house by herself and all this stuff and like that. So she's like, when do I get to go? And I'm like, when you're 18. So
How often do you get sick on the trips, you know, like outside that, you know, the other
um
story? Is it like out of 10 trips, how often does it happen?
it doesn't, you know, knock on wood, it doesn't typically happen often. I've got a pretty good gut, and like I'm pretty used to the food and like what I'm around. Like obviously I don't drink water unless I can be sure that it's free of pathogens. I mean, I do have a good story for you. I told it a number of years ago. Um, But I remember this was on one of my first, or no, probably first couple of years I was out there when they started to really the village really started opening up to me and started taking me to some really special places. And I went to this one, and it was a really, really long, difficult hike, and I just got really dehydrated, and I drank all my water with me. And it had been raining. I, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was. I was all watching those, like, survival TV series shows or whatever, and I was like, "Oh man, I was like, the moss on the trees is acting like a natural filter. I can drink the rainwater that's collected in the moss." So I started drinking all this moss. I climb up on the tree and I grab these big clumps of moss, and I'd be wringing them out, drinking, and getting all sorts of bird shit and like bugs and all sorts of stuff in it. And I'm just like, at that point, I was just like, "Oh God, I got to hydrate myself," and this and that. And I went back down to the village, and I stayed there. I was staying in the village, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I stay in the men's hut because in with the group I stay with, they're called the Dani, and they're the most predominant ethnic group that's there. And the men sleep in a hut, and the women sleep in another hut. And I stay in the men's hut, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night, like, I'm like, "Oh man, I have got to go." My stomach was just rumbling and blah blah blah. And I remember like stepping carefully over bodies that were like passed out in this hut. And I had a roll of toilet paper with me, because normally it's just like a squatter out there. It's typically, so I always try to bring something with me that's like, some Western comfort. So it's usually a roll of toilet paper. And I went out there, and I'm walking, and I just remember looking outside, and it was just like so beautiful. The moon was out. The stars were just like so bright. And I'm just like, all right, I'm going to walk far. I'm going to walk far, walk far. And I sat down, and I just was like exploded. Explosive diarrhea, just like, oh my God, it was horrible. And I was like, I am super sick. And, I did my business, and I went back in, I snuck back in, and I went to sleep, and they got up before me. I ended up sleeping in, which was weird because I don't sleep in the Highlands because they're up talking all the time, and over the fire, they're kicking, logs on and stuff like that. Keep the fire going. And I remember waking up, and everybody's up, and I walked outside, and I had a couple of these old guys that were like, just like with their machetes, like just cutting the grass and stuff. And they came walking by, and they gave me the dirtiest look. And I was just like, what was going on? And my friend with me looked at me, and he goes, "Really?" And I was like, "What?" And I just kind of glanced over, and I had shit in the middle of the village, and there was a giant TP pile of toilet paper, like a mound of it right in the middle, and it was from me. And I was like, "Oh man!" It was like imagine somebody coming over and just shitting in your living room. So yeah, so I don't drink moss water anymore. But when I was on Good Enough,
Bear Grylls did you dirty.
Yeah, all right, I'll do that. But when I was on Good Enough, I was drinking water from the mountain streams because I don't know, everybody was drinking it, and I'm like, all right, whatever. And it was really heavy flowing. It was really cold coming in, so the lack of parasites in it was probably a little less than what I had drank from the moss clumps. So, but yeah. So,
man, have you ever checked your stools for like worms or anything?
No, you want me to send you a sample? You can run it for me.
No, I'm good. But I would imagine you've picked something up.
Probably. I've had coccidia. I know that. I had coccidia. I think I had malaria, but that's not going to be in my stools. Yeah, but wow. For the most part, like, I don't really have any, stomach stuff or get sick. I got like some feverish stuff out there a couple times, but and then it went away. I travel with a really nice medical pack that I made that has like everything and anything you could possibly imagine in it. So I'll bring like Western style medicine with me sometimes, in my pack. So if I have some kind of, issue, I pretty much can rectify it there, or at least gain a little bit more comfort for myself, as opposed to not taking something or whatever. So,
yeah, is it like a dream job that you have working at Reptilandia? I mean, is it like it seems like pretty much everything that you're doing is basically a herper's dream. Working the stuff that you guys are doing there, those enclosures are just absolutely mind blowing. I saw that the one reel that you guys put up with the lizard, like out on the branch, and the rain going, and
Oh
it
yeah.
looks like you're looking at an animal in its environment.
Well, that was the
I think
goal.
Madagascar.
Yeah, that was the goal. We wanted to get it as accurate as we could, and it really is. I mean, it's like I'll wake up, like I'm saying earlier, like, oh, sorry, I'm just super tired. It's just like it's like when you sit down and think about it. At the end of the day, it really is a dream job. Like, I feel very fortunate to do what I'm doing. And where I'm at with my personal career, and then like my professional career and stuff like that. I feel really, really, really privileged. So I'm very happy with my life right now, even though I'm like barely awake. I'm like, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, are you guys like constantly expanding there? Are
Yeah,
you
we're
always looking to the
eventually.
next exhibit?
So like what we're doing right now, for the most part, is we got to the point where we got it all finished. But now we're kind of like fine tuning things to the point where it's just like perfect now. And then with that being said, when more revenue comes in, eventually it has, because we're kind of at a dead time right now in the season. We would eventually like to put some more outdoor enclosures and stuff. Like all our indoor stuff is pretty much done. Like, we're just going to be adjusting enclosures just to make, we're adding more plants, we're adding better lighting, we're adding better filters. We're kind of just upgrading what we have already just to make it better. But we do want to put some outdoor enclosures eventually, for people to enjoy as well.
How important? I know you mentioned UVB before.
Yeah.
Do you guys provide UVB for like everything at the zoo?
Yeah, so we have one of the cool things we have in our tropical building. It's a 2-story building, so we have these really cool UV transmittable sheets of like acrylic, or is it acrylic? Yeah, it's acrylic, and it transmits the UV. A lot of the zoos are using it, and the
Wow.
name of the product is skipping my mind right now, so I apologize. But it allows the UV to be penetrating through the acrylic, and so the animals are getting it. But we also offer supplemental UV too. We get stuff we do a lot of stuff with Exoterra. They
Heck yeah. They're a show sponsor.
Yes, yes. Exoterra is great. They've been around for a long time, and they really help us out with a lot of product. A lot of lighting and things like that. We also play around too with Arcadia as well. It's getting difficult to get it, and they're really expensive, but it's really good.
Yeah.
So I like to offer, in nature, lighting is really important, and as well as on an exhibit or an exhibition, because lighting sets the mood for everything, as well as creating behavior that you're wanting, and allowing your animals to do what they're supposed to do. So whenever I can, I'm always trying to implement. I got to shut this light off because that's better. It keeps showing this glare in my eyes, killing me. Like I said, if I'm able to incorporate ultraviolet lighting and stuff like that into enclosures already, I will. Whether it's snakes, frogs, or whatnot. I mean, obviously tortoises, are requiring it more, but and lizards and things like that. But I'll always include it in there because if you figure you've got an animal that's in nature, it's always going to come in contact with some kind of ultraviolet lighting. It's just
Yeah.
part of being in the wild. It's just how it is. So it's not gonna hurt anything. If anything, it's gonna benefit. So
Yeah. Yeah. I wish that there was more research on it to kind of put that debate to bed, or at least to like for people like me that provide UV for all my animals to be able to say, yeah, I provide it and here's why,
Yeah.
like definitively.
Yeah, there's a
But
lot of studies that have been done on it, and there's some really good reptile groups that go into it. But a lot of it is it's more than just add this light or add this light. It gets really kind of scientific, and that can be kind of a turnoff to a lot of people. For myself, some of that stuff is really freaking hard to understand. And I think that is a factor why a lot of people potentially stay away from it. It's not to say you can't keep an animal without it. I mean, obviously, like you've got, like you were saying earlier, you want to get some racks to put some more snakes in. You can certainly keep many different species of colubrids and pythons and everything like that, without ultraviolet light in rack systems. However, if you provide it, you might see something cool. Your animals might do something better, or they might just be even more healthier. So it's not like you have to do it, but I always do it. It's just my personal.
Yeah. Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
And I have racks and I use racks for babies and everything,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just it's I want to see my snakes. I want to see them all the time.
Yeah.
I want to see them when they're chilling. It's like when they're in a rack, I don't know what they're doing
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So,
unless I open
like I
it.
said, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just going to benefit them, and that's what we need to
Yeah.
do.
How do you make your soil mixture? What is it composed of?
Okay, so I do different things, obviously, depending on if it's a snake, if it's a lizard, where it's what part of the world. For like if you're thinking just like in general, like for like a forest kind of thing, I do like a lot of peat. I'll do sphagnum mix. I'll add some cocoa husk in there. I'll also do some the no float mulch too. I don't like soil that's just going to be compressed. I want stuff that's going to have fluff to it. It's going to have dimension to it. It's going to promote digging. It's going to promote, bio media to develop in it and stuff like that too. So I experiment with different stuff. Sometimes I'll put sand in it too as well, which is nice because that really helps out with a lot of lizards that are like digging, and it
Mm,
creates like really nice nesting environments for them in chambers and such like that too, especially with the arboreal monitors and monitors in general too. So
okay. And like for the blood pythons, you had mentioned the leaf litter. What kind of leaves are you
I really
using?
like doing like magnolia. Oak is really good too. I'll use bamboo leaves for certain things. I try to get as accurate as I can to the environment where they're at. So I'll go out like on the property, or if I'm driving, I'm always looking at stuff. If I'm driving and I see something, I'll pull over the road and I always have like a bucket in my truck bed or something, and I'll just pick stuff up, or trash bags. I have all these tubs and stuff in my truck, and I'll just be like, all right, I'm grabbing all this leaf litter, or hey, where do you live? Or do you live by I have a friend that has a gigantic magnolia tree, and I always go over to see him. Like he's 4 or 5 hours away, and I'll go over there. I'll load up like 7 or 8 bags of magnolia leaves, um,
Wow.
because all that stuff is really good when it breaks down. It doesn't just break down and get absorbed in the soil for things to eat, but it also like magnolia and Indian almond leaves and stuff that really helps like conditioning with scales and skin and things like that. If you soak an animal with that, it can help benefit them too, softens the water, things like that. So there's a lot of benefits from having that. Like, why have a sterile environment on a puppy pad? You know,
Yeah.
when you could offer something like, something that's going to be stimulate behavior as well as provide, something beneficial.
So the last time I used leaf litter, it was magnolia leaves, and I ended up getting like a soot mold. It was like
Oh,
a dry. It was like a dry gray black, like
okay.
sooty mold, and
Interesting.
I panicked and I just bagged everything and threw it out and like gave up and just switched
Yeah.
over to just plain coconut husk.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, when you're dealing with anything biological, you never know. Something could have been on it that just, started developing, started growing. You know,
Yeah.
I've never had any like mold growth on it. If anything, I've had it just kind of like disintegrate, if anything like that.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously, we're in a controlled environment. You want to take care of that because in the wild, they can just leave.
Sure.
This, no risk of, mold spores or any kind of gross things developing. They just leave that area if they even do. So,
What like how do you get the leaves ready to put into enclosures, or do you just bag them and put them in, or are you
well,
cooking them, rinsing them?
so a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll bag them and I'll rinse them. Or what I'll do is I'll bag them and I'll bag them up real tight and I'll set them out in the sun for a couple days so it gets super hot and it just kind of
Mm,
cooks them in there. I've also done stuff in the oven. I've microwaved stuff. I mean, for the most part, like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll just throw them in there, depending. Obviously, if it's like the environment where I'm getting it, if it's a real cruddy place, I'm going to take more care into it. But for the most part, like, I feel like a lot of that stuff is relatively safe if you just kind of give it an overall, like, a heat treatment. to kill anything that might be on it. Because I mean, obviously, you want like some of those beneficial bugs and stuff, but you don't want anything that's going to be negative, impacting your collection. So I'll like heat treat it.
Sure.
That's usually the best way. I've also done like back in the prevenamite days, I'll take like a big bag of leaves and I'll just hit it with some prevenamite and I'll tie it up and I'll leave it for a couple days and then take it out and spread it all out and let it, air dry so there's no residual on it and stuff like that too. But
Yeah.
I've never really seen any big issues with it from what I've done.
You had you mentioned before the softness and hardness of the water with the Bolin's pythons in their natural environment. What is the water hardness?
Well, the water. Okay, so I did I did a water test when I was out there, and it was obviously it's really acidic just because of all the vegetation that's thousands and thousands of years of just decomposing vegetation and soil and stuff. The soil's like just smells so good. It smells so fresh while you're there with everything. But the water was pretty acidic. It's the area is heavily volcanic. So you've got trace elements of that is going into the water sources. And a lot of that water is coming out of, the mountain rocks and things like that too. So it wasn't a big surprise to me to see, that it had that acidity levels to it. So it wasn't like crazy numbers, but it certainly was like it showed up on the test, like, oh, the water's, higher pH or something like that. So.
Yeah. What and before you had talked when you were talking about the Bolin's pythons, you said that they were lean and mean. Like, is that like so keeping your captive Bolin's pythons, are you trying to look at their body condition and sort of get it to look similar to what you see out in nature?
Yeah. Obviously we're dealing with a different scenario because we're not in the wild, we're in captivity, and there's we can get it really close. But obviously there's certain things. They're in a controlled environment. No matter how big the enclosure is, it is a controlled environment. So with that being said, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
I know it's been a long day, buddy.
No.
The lean and mean, like the body.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's
so
right.
I obviously when I'm observing animals in the wild, I'm always paying attention to their body condition. I want to see, what they look like. Obviously the frequency of feeding is something that's really interesting in the wild because I have zero idea how frequent they're eating. I don't know what their daytime activity really is. I have ideas of in observations and notes of like how active they are, but that still doesn't mean squat if I on some different levels as far as how frequent they're grabbing food, the abundance in that area of animals, or it's a seasonal thing, or if they're just not wanting to eat. So with that being said, I try to replicate visually what those animals would look like, and base it off because it's like, okay, I'm feeding babies. I feed babies and juveniles once a week, maybe twice a week for neonates, just to push them to get past, get a couple good sheds in them, to get past that fragile state. But my adult animals and subadult animals are eating twice a month, and that's perfectly fine for them.
Nice. And do you ever have any that you have to dial back or give them more just based on them as an individual animal, or is that kind of a good standard across the board?
Really. I did get an animal from somebody. They sent me. I bought it from them, and it had. I don't know. It was weird. It never gained weight. It was gained substantial amount of weight, and we had run like every test you possibly could run on it. We did stool. We did a full PCR test on it, and it all came back negative. There was no health issues for whatever reason, but I could never really keep it like full looking to me, if that makes sense to you. It always kind of had a little bit of sag to it. And so aside from that animal I was feeding more frequently, to try to fill it out a little bit more. Certainly I wasn't like trying to fatten it up, but I wanted to fill it out more because I felt like it just needed a little bit more to it. So, and it could just be it was just the individual animal. So
Did that animal survive?
That animal eventually ended up dying. It was, I don't know, it was probably 15 or 16 years old, which is not
Oh, wow.
super old. I mean, the
Yeah.
longest one I've ever had was 21 years. And
Mm.
that was a captive animal that when I was at the zoo, I was working with. And, I don't know if it could have lived longer because, obviously when you're at the zoo, you've got people leave, you've got keepers that take over things, they change their frequency of stuff like that. So, like, obviously, when I came in, I was like, I'm taking the Bolins, and I was like, sorry, there's nothing you can say, I'm taking them. And I went through that and just kind of like, and I looked at the records and it said it was 20 or 21 when it died. So I was like, wow. So, but yeah, I mean, that animal lived the one that was just thinner, it lived a very nice life. And the person that I got it from absolutely loved it. They just didn't understand it in the way that it should. I don't know how to say that. They just didn't. It was a very sterile environment for it.
Mm.
And then when I brought it here and quarantined it and double checked everything with the PCRs and all that stuff, and then eventually incorporated in the enclosure with the other, it just was like it absolutely the behavior changed. It was just a different animal in a positive way, but it just wasn't. It just never gained the weight that I had wanted it to. So there was some kind of underlining issue with it,
Mm.
that wasn't like a disease related thing. I don't know. So,
What behaviors did you see that were
I saw it.
positive?
I saw it climbing, which was great. Like, it
Mm.
never had a chance to really stretch all the way out. I got to watch it like explore and just go to like the extremes of the enclosure that it would never have had an option for. It was able. I mean, it would sit down right next to the stream that I have in there, and the fog would roll on it, and it would build up dew on its body, and it just it emulated comfort and happiness.
Mm.
Like, you could look at it and you're like, wow, like it shined. It's the way the body condition, aside from it being a little thin, it just radiated. Its tone looked really nice and everything. And it just did behavior that what a Bolin should do, like it wasn't
Wow.
just an erratic animal. It was very calm and just, accepting to everything. So it was cool. I miss it. It sucked, but it's, part of keeping animals. We lose animals. That's what happens. So as long as it had a long life and it was with me for, I think, 4 or 5 years before it passed away, I was very happy with it. So,
Wow.
yeah,
And that was in your private collection?
this was an animal that I brought in for the zoo that I purchased. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had my whole private collection stuff is a whole story. It's when I had moved out here to take this position, I brought my group of animals with me. I had 8 animals with me, a 4.4 group that I had raised up since they were little red worms. And my wife and I, we built on the property. There was a big garage unit. We basically built that into our outdoor reptile building, and we had it insulated and wired up and everything. And it was wonderful. And we had a huge winter storm. I can't remember how long ago it was. It was a famous Texas storm. And we got down to like, I think 12 or 13 degrees,
Wow.
for like weeks. And I remember that night I had my animals, my wife and we actually brought a blow up mattress and we went and slept into the snake building because I wanted to make sure, everything was good. I had, supplemental heaters on, and I knew the Bolins could handle a certain amount of temperature drop, obviously. And I just wanted to be there to make sure everything was good. And I remember waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm like, oh, okay, the building's nice. It's 65 degrees in here. They're fine. We reached our low for that night, and I'm like, all right, let's go back into the house. When we woke up that morning, we didn't realize that everybody in like a 30 or 40 mile radius, we all lost power.
Oh.
So the temperature in my building dropped down to like 12 degrees, and all my animals died.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
So, and it wasn't just my animals. My wife had a lot of her snakes also. So I had lost those animals. Um, I mean, I had friends that lost Gila monsters in that freeze, and I mean, they get cold, and it was devastating. And we had lost power. We had ice on the ground, snow on the ground for several weeks before we got power. So we were running generators, but we had fallen asleep, not knowing that the power was going to go out. So, and we didn't have an emergency generator hooked up like that. I had a generator that I had to go manually hook up, but and then after that happened, I had built a building on the back of our house. It was literally 20 feet from the house, and it was a 20 by 20 building. And I built these incredible Boland's cages that were on rollers, and it was like open air system. It was just beautiful. And I also had some zoo animals in there too that we were quarantining at the time. And we had a fire, and I lost all my animals again.
No.
It was bad. It's bad. So, I
Dude,
just
how do you have the will to go on? Like
man,
that's
for a while I was done keeping animals. I was just like, I can't do it. It's not fair. It's not fair to the animals. It's not me. It was about the animals. It wasn't, there's no way for that. And then my wife, convinced me to be like, hey, this is what you do. It wasn't your fault. You need to, keep doing what you're doing. And so I rebuilt my collection up again. So now I'm raising up, they're about 2 years old. So I have some 2-year-olds. So I've got a 1, 2, 3, a 4.5. Yeah, 4.5 that I'm raising up now. So
wow.
yeah.
So you had 4.4 and you lost all of them, and then what did you lose the second time around?
The other one I lost 3.3. Yeah.
Oh man, dude, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
That is
and some of it too was
absolutely
like I had good friends of mine. I had their animals like with me, like they were in my group. So I lost their animals also. So it was a really dark moment. But I'm back.
how do you even tell your friends that
Oh,
had
it
to
was
have been
terrible.
horrible?
I mean, it was terrible. And they understood everything. It was just really bad. I mean, it's like the ultimate fear. Like no keeper wants to have to deal with that. It's like, our animals are our passion. We do everything, well, we should be doing everything for them as keepers, and then being able to not control something so devastating is just it's such a difficult thing to deal with, So, fortunately, I had a lot of people in the community that reached out and really helped out, with stuff like that.
Well, that's good. I mean, you do so much for the hobby and the community,
Oh, I
especially
appreciate
with
that. I try.
you do. And I mean, how many times have you been on NPR and like the content on there is always fantastic. I always love hearing the stories that you have to tell and just the natural history of the animals and your passion and all that. And man, that is so devastating. And I'm happy that the community, came together and
Yeah, I
kind
mean
of
that's one good thing.
return.
We for the most part we do have a really positive community in a lot of ways where we should be a family. It's like we should be out there helping each other out. And I have seen there has been some recent devastating losses just as of lately with some big collections
Yeah.
and it's so there's been a lot of people that have been putting together some like GoFundMe stuff for people and stuff like that too, because it's just, I mean, I didn't want any money. I just wanted to be left alone. That was my thing. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you got to grieve on that kind of stuff, and everybody's different. So it's
Well, with the fire thing, I mean, that just happened to Vin,
Yep.
recently. And that's like, I mean, he's like the godfather of
Yep.
boas,
Yeah.
and for
Yeah. I
him
mean,
to
those
lose
animals
his
that he had
stock.
were, were represented animals that's it. It's a really surreal moment to deal with when it happens to you, and then when you see other people dealing with it, it's just like you've got to reach out and be like, hey, I know, let me know what you need and stuff. And it just really sucks because my biggest thing was like I was hurting inside, but my pain was for the animals because I couldn't do anything, and that was my thing. I ran out to get in there to grab things, and by that time it was like it was so far gone. Like it was just the fire department came out. I think they put 8,000 gallons of water on it and 3,000 gallons of a flame retardant, and it put it out. And then I went to sleep. My wife and I just fell asleep afterwards because we were just brain fried. And then the fire started again. They had to come back out, and it almost got the house. So it was just like a total, the worst scenario you could possibly think of. So it was pretty bad.
It's so terrible. That
Yeah.
is so, and the animals are all individuals, and I know that from my own collection.
Yeah.
My Argentine boa pushes on the glass when I come in the room, and I open the door, and she comes out and
Yeah.
hangs out under her cage, and it's like
Yeah.
they're all individuals.
They're your friends.
It's
That's family.
yeah,
That's what it is. These are what we look towards to see every day when we have moments of, sadness or, difficulties in our time. I always go to my animals and I always find happiness in them. And then when something like that happens, it just is like a real wake up of just like fuckery. It's just like, why, you know?
yeah,
But
yeah, man.
we need to learn to push forward. That's how we evolve, and that's how we grow. And I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason, even though it's really difficult to accept it when it involves death and things like that. It's just that's just what happens.
How is your trips over there? How have they changed you from like a spiritual aspect? Have they at all? Like
Oh yeah,
like with them being as spiritual as they are, and the way that like when you got sick, they were like the mountain gave something to you, and now it's taking something. Like, does that leave a lasting impact where
yeah.
then you start to feel that in your day to day life?
Yeah, there's definitely a presence. Like, I'm not a big religious person by any means. I've seen things in my life that I can't explain. I've heard things that I can't explain, and whenever I go to New Guinea or some of these places, there's so much tradition and energy that's there, that it's like you feel it when you get in. I don't care how not open you are to that stuff. You feel it. It's there. And there are things obviously that we can't explain, and it's exciting to accept that because there's things outside of our realm of comprehension or belief, but they're real things. Good Enough Island was very interesting for me because I've been traveling to West Papua in the highlands where I'm sleeping in the village. I sleep with the locals. I'm basically a local for the time I'm there, and and I'm experiencing things, and I hear stories, and I hear beliefs and ghost stories and folklore and all this stuff. But when I went to Good Enough, it was a very different place. Like the amount of spiritual belief in everything was very like prevalent. Like um, it was strange. Like when I got there, like it was like we had ceremonies. We had to ask permission to do things. Ask we couldn't go some places, even if we went with this nature park, and they funded this whole project. We chartered a plane to fly us out in this really remote area and all this stuff, and we invested a lot of time and a lot of money. And it's interesting when they say you can't go there, and you're like, well, why? And they're like, well, because the mountain's not accepting you.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, I'll listen to that because I've dealt with it firsthand. But you've got some people like, oh no, this is about. And I was like, no, you don't do that. You don't listen. You don't not listen to what they're saying. This is very real because this is what they believe, and there is a lot of truth to a lot of the things that they experience there because these places are very, very old. There's a lot of history involved, a lot of mystique and belief in some of these places, which is super. I don't know. It's super awesome because there's still that concept in the world. It's still there. I remember I was hearing stories when we were there because like I was saying, I love talking to people and asking them about beliefs of different things there and if they know this animal. And I was getting all these different stories. They're like, now, if you go up there and you feel like you're being watched, don't be afraid. And I'm like, okay, I'm not afraid. I'm like, what's watching me? They're like, those are the protectors of the mountain. And I'm like, all right, well, what do the protectors look like? They're like, well, they're dwarfs. They're little people that live all the way up in the mountain. And you can't catch them. The only way you can is by taking your finger and looping it into the curls of their hair. That is the only way you can hold them. Otherwise, you can't grab them. But they're the ones that will decide how far you can go up. I was like, okay. And then I was like, how far do you go up? They're like, we've never been to the top. And I was like, why not? And they're like, why should we? I'm like, well, don't you want to know what's there? They're like, well, the mountain will let us know. The mountain will decide if we can go or we can. And that's a reality there. The other thing that was really interesting was I've traveled all over the world, and obviously New Guinea and Indonesia is in my heart, and that's where 99% of the time I'm at. If I'm traveling, I'm there. I spend time in Ecuador too because I love Ecuador and the rainforest and stuff. But New Guinea is like my home away from home. And when I was on Good Enough, I remember the entire time I was there, because we had to go to this area. We hiked up into this area that we were not intentionally going to first, because we got denied after we established all the communication with this initial tribal group. And they said, no, we're not taking you now, after we arrived, which put a big kind of halt on this expedition, because we're all there. We've invested time, money, blah, blah, blah. So we're kind of scrambling with these other groups, trying to find out if there's another group that'll take us. And we found another group that'll take us. And it was interesting how things worked out, because they took us up to this place, and we had to hike up to this spot, which was about a 2-hour hike. And it wasn't terrible. It was, it was a long hike uphill and all that stuff, and it wasn't great. But we get up into this village, and the man that's there, he doesn't speak English, which is interesting because everybody in the island learns English. So they speak English and then two different local dialects. And so he didn't speak English, but he was there. He was a child when the Japanese were on the island during World War II. And he remembers the Japanese coming there, trying to get the locals to help them, fight the Australians. And I asked him, I was like, and he was apparently the shaman of the mountain, and I didn't realize it until afterwards. He brought out a box of all these old little trinkets and items that had all these kind of belief and power to him that his father had left him. And he showed us, and I filmed it because the guy won't be around long. And he put on all these adornments and things like that, and it was really pretty incredible. And he was talking to us before we went up into the mountain. He stood out there, and he was practically blind, and he's got a cane, and he's like yelling into the mountain, and he's saying something. I don't know what it is. And all the villages behind him, and he's standing up there. And it was really like this moment where I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And the entire time I was there in the village, I had these incredible dreams, like so vivid that like I was awake. And there were things that I never thought, like I remember, like things of like my childhood, like I never even thought of remembering. And these really interesting scenarios of being there. And it just was every night. And I remember like a couple nights, like I woke up the next morning, I'm down having coffee with the other team, members of the team. And I was like, man, I am having these crazy dreams. And like everybody like stopped and they said, you too? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, every night I'm having these dreams, like I'm awake. And they're like, it's been like that for us too, since we've been here. And then, and then the locals are just kind of laughing. They're like, it's the mountain communicating with you. So I love it. It's just awesome.
Dude, that's so wild.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm going to let you go so you can get some sleep. And I know that, I know you're tired. I could talk to you for another 2 hours.
I enjoy talking. It's a passion, obviously. I love what I do. I love where I go, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing as long as I can. And keep sharing my experiences and what I'm learning, and just the love of what I do. It's like it's about it. So check out the Bullets Python Roundtable. Like, follow, subscribe.
Yeah, heck yeah. That's over on the Trap Talk with everybody's friend MJ.
Yep. You can also follow me on Instagram under Project Black Python, and I post a lot of stuff on there. And I also have projectblackpython.org, which I try to keep updated. I got a lot of stuff that I'm behind on, so I apologize. But yeah, and I'm just on Facebook. If you want to just ask me questions, just go for it. I'm happy to talk to people. It doesn't matter what about, just if I know, I'm happy to ask.
How many books have you written?
I have done 2 books, and I'm working on the 3rd one right now, which is the volume 2 of Serpents in the Clouds. So I'm finishing that one up. I wanted to encompass another section to it, which will probably be next year. So it's going to be a little longer. But I've got a good enough island in there, which it's only been like a handful of people that have ever gone there, let alone look for Bolin's pythons there. So I got a really, really, really beautiful chapter on just good enough island and everything. And I'm also going to be incorporating some stuff on Papua New Guinea, because next year I'm going to be doing some stuff with the nature park out there. And I'm going to help them collect some animals for their facility there, because they focus on New Guinea endemics. So they'll be permitted.
Oh, wow.
So we'll get permitted through the government, which will be really nice. And we'll go out and meet some of these local communities. And I can I'm really excited because I want to compare data from the wilds on West Papua to the eastern side of the island and see if there's any kind of difference in, appearance, overall behavior, or just, nesting ecology and all that stuff too, which I'm really interested in. So,
Man, that's awesome. And where can people get your books when they come out?
so they're all out of print right now. I get people asking me, the first one was edition Chimera. It's called Black Python, and it was a fun book to write. It was the first book outside of a 4-sentence paragraph from every piece of literature that's been written. So it was like, it served as kind of like a springboard for future work to be done. And then once that one was done, then Serpents in the Clouds came out, and that one encompasses a lot of my trips and travels and data from West Papua in just adventures and crazy stories and things like that I've talked about. And you see them pop up every once in a while. Serpents in the Clouds 2 is going to be really cool. It's going to be worth the wait. It'll be cool. And then after that, I don't know if I'm going to write anything for a while. I'm tired.
Well, just focus on what you're doing right now, because I'm sure it'll be great. I definitely want to get that. So when that comes out, is that on your website?
Yeah, I'll have it everywhere. I'll post it up everywhere, and people can get it. We did
Awesome.
let's see, my good friend Russ Gurley did the publishing and editing and all that stuff for the layouts and stuff for Serpents in the Clouds. And I think we did 500 books. Yeah, I think we did 500 books and then 100 hardcovers, and we sold them within the first couple of months. I was like, what? So everyone's like, where can we get a copy? So you see them pop up every once in a while. There's some really good Facebook groups like Herp Literature and stuff like that with Michael Crick, who sells a lot of books. And I actually saw one pop up the other day. So they're out there. You just got to find them. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll have to come back on when the next book comes out.
I really enjoyed talking to you, Adam. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, real quick.
Yeah.
If would it be your dream, the pinnacle of everything you're doing, to find a new subspecies of Bolini?
Oh yeah, of course. My dream is to see ebolans from all of New Guinea, from the far west birdhead all the way down to Papua New Guinea, and then be able to find one on Good Enough Island, and then the Huon Peninsula too, because it's geographically divided throughout the island itself. So to be able to compare all that stuff would just be my dream. I'd be happy as piss, as they say.
Hell yeah. All right. Thank you, brother.
Not a problem, man. Have a great night. Thanks again.